Today we're going to read about what came after the ancestral Pueblo. And while we're reading, the big question to have in mind is what are some of the reasons why some Native American groups moved from place to place? The Pueblo Native people and scientists agree that the descendants of the ancestral Pueblo cliff dwellers include the Pueblo. Today, these people live in the American Southwest. In Spanish, the word Pueblo means village. In the 1500s and 1600s, the first Spanish explorers arrived in the Southwest. There they met the native people. The Spanish named these people for the villages where they had lived and farmed for hundreds, even thousands of years. Pueblo villages look like they're modeled after ancestral Pueblo cliff dwellings. Like the ancestral Pueblo, the Pueblo built apartment-style homes out of adobe bricks. This is one reason scientists feel certain that the Pueblo people are related to the ancient ancestral Pueblo cliff dwellers. You can see in this first picture here, one group of Pueblo people named the Hopi built their villages on the tops of mesas for protection from enemy attacks. And a mesa is the Spanish word for table, a rocky, flat-topped hill. And in this picture up here, you can see that like the ancient ancestral Pueblo, the Hopi built homes with different levels connected by ladders. 19 Pueblo villages still exist. They can be found on the high mesas, in the deep canyons, and along the river valleys of New Mexico. All Pueblo villages share many traditions passed down from their ancestors, but each separate village also has its own special customs. The Hopi are Pueblo people. They stayed in the high desert or on the plateau areas of Arizona, just like their ancestors. They built villages on the high mesas. There they grew corn, squash, beans, and melons. The word Hopi comes from a phrase that means the peaceful people. Today the Hopi live mostly in northeastern Arizona. The Zuni are also Pueblo. They live in the western part of New Mexico. The Zuni do not share a language with the other Pueblo people. The Navajo. For tens of thousands of years, groups of Native Americans have migrated. Some moved to follow game, and by game they mean animals that are hunted for sport or for food. Some moved because the climate changed. Some moved to find more or better land. Others were driven away by enemies. Whenever people move, they bring some things with them. They leave other things behind. The Navajo migrated from northern Canada to the Southwest. In their language, they call themselves Dina, meaning the people. The Navajo language links them to their ancestors in Alaska and Canada. Perhaps the Navajo are directly related to the hunter-gatherers who lived in Beringia many thousands of years ago. The Navajo who came to the Southwest from Canada fought with the Pueblo who had lived in the Southwest for thousands of years. But the Navajo also learned from the Pueblo. They learned how to survive in the harsh climate of the high desert. For example, the Navajo often used adobe to build their homes, but they built individual domed houses in small, scattered groups rather than in villages. The Spanish first brought sheep to the Southwest in the 1600s. As a result, raising sheep became a big part of the Navajo way of life. The Navajo became more settled. They used fleece from their sheep to spin wool and weave blankets and rugs. Still known for their weaving skills today, the Navajo make up the largest Native American nation in the United States. In this picture you can see it says, after being introduced by the Spanish, sheep became an important part of the Navajo life. The Apache and the Comanche. Like the Navajo, the Apache also migrated from northern Canada to the Southwest. They traveled along the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. Apache territory covered parts of present-day Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and northern Mexico. The Apache hunted and traded. Later, after the Spanish brought horses to America, the Apache learned how to ride the new animals. Horses made it easier for the Apache to hunt and to raid rival Navajo villages, as well as to attack Spanish forts. This picture on this side says the Spanish introduced horses to the Americas, and the Apache learned to use these new animals. The Apache hunted on horseback. They used buffalo hides to make teepees, and that's what's in this picture here is the teepees. The Comanche were the only Native Americans more powerful than the Apache. The Comanche successfully gained Apache land and pushed the Apache farther west. Because of this, the Apache finally had to make peace with their enemies, the Spaniards. They needed Spanish protection from the Comanche. On a hot summer's day in the 1700s, 4 Apache chiefs and their followers met with Spanish missionaries in San Antonio, Texas. There the Apache turned over their weapons. In a ceremony of peace the Apache and the Europeans buried the hatchet. This meant that they agreed to stop fighting with each other. We still use the expression "bury the hatchet" when we agree to stop arguing with someone. In this picture, the horse was important to the Apache and to the Comanche. Unfortunately, the hatchet wasn't really buried. Not all the Apache made peace, nor did the Europeans or their descendants leave them alone. All through the 1800s, the Apaches were at war with other Native Americans and with the various settlers. They fought against the Spaniards, the Mexicans, and finally the Americans. One of the most famous Apache leaders was Geronimo, who fought to save his people's land. Today, several Apache groups live in the southwestern United States. The Comanche mostly live in Oklahoma.